Venerable Jeffrey Hopkins' translation, so anyone who's following along. It's this book, or the other edition looks like this book. So there are two versions. There's probably even more, but those are the ones that we're using if you're following along. Rinpoche is the retired abbot of His Holiness the Dalai Lama's monastery. He holds the degree of Geshe Lharampa, which is the highest degree one can achieve in the Tibetan Buddhist Gelug tradition. Rinpoche is recognized by all the greatest scholars in the world, including His Holiness the Dalai Lama, as one of the greatest holders of the lineage of the Sutra and Tantra vehicle of Buddhism. It would be rare anywhere in the world to have a teacher like this. Those of us who've lived in India or Nepal can attest to the fact that getting teaching time with the retired abbot of the Dalai Lama's monastery is very, very difficult. I remember the previous abbot, Demolocha Rinpoche, I was able to meet with, and then he gave a transmission of the 5 great texts to, I think there were 7,000 to 10,000 people there. That's the kind of FaceTime you get with abbots and Rinpoches when you travel afar to go seek them out. You find out that you actually have access sometimes, in this instance, in more ways than people who pray every day to be able to meet just once with the qualified Lama. And we have this opportunity all of the time. We have this opportunity to look at 500 teachings online when we aren't here with Rinpoche. And then we have the opportunity to spend this precious time with him, and spend this precious time with someone who was educated at Drepung in some of his classes before 1959 invasion. So it's very rare not only to have a qualified master, but to have a master who actually experienced that traditional monastic education in its purest form, encased by the Himalayan mountains without anything able to get in to mess with it. And that's just really special. And those monks and nuns that were part of that have a different level of experience and renunciation because of the trauma that they went through. If they're sitting here on the other side of it and still sitting with monks or nuns' robes on and still practicing those 5 great texts, that's a very rare, special individual. And that's not someone that you come across regularly. Lori and I can attest to, Lori said, I've never met a being like this. He sits all night and reads all day and reads, sleeps 10 minutes, gets up, mantras. You'll see him sleeping and I'll hear click, click, click. And it'll be, he has a metal bucket next to him. It'll be his mala clicking on the bucket. And he's dead asleep. I'll hear snoring and I'll hear the mantra mala clicking. I've just never, I lived with Rinpoche before, I lived with Geshe Gompo, I lived in Drepung, and I've just never seen before my eyes renunciation and the real thing. And I get it sometimes, and I want to get out of samsara, and I practice real hard. But to see someone who doesn't do anything but what it says in the 3 principal paths, that is the definition of renunciation, day and night, seeking to get out of cyclic existence. And if you have that, then you have renunciation. If you have no other thought, day or night, then just to get out of cyclic existence, you have that. And we're sitting next to a being who I can attest to, has that beyond the shadow of a doubt. And that is rare. Forget all the other Geshe Lharampa and the 5 books and all of that. And just look at what that practice in those books created. And that's a being that is so different than any other kind of being that you can interact with, that it's inarguable that something's working. Inarguable. The level of content that someone can have sitting on a bed 7 days a week, looking at Tibetan words, 500 pages a day. Adrian and I went through the texts, put them in order because they were all out of order. I don't even think it matters, but they were all out of order. But there's 500 or so pages, his daily prayer. And that's not the book, or his other 6-session Guru Yoga books. So we're talking like 800 pages maybe a day are being read still, 80-something years old. So If Rinpoche can do that with his dialysis treatment and diabetes, he had a heart condition, he has trouble walking, but still does that every day without compromise. And it's just, I know we have the teaching to get to, but I think whenever we can really recognize Rinpoche for who he is, I think it's very important. And everyone has known me for a very long time and knows I am anti-mystical. I do not like to talk about weird stuff, but I'm telling you right now that the being next to me is not operating on the same wavelength that we are, and it's because of the Dharma. So before we get started, let's do the introductory prayers. Let's do the prayer of refuge and a mandala offering, and then Rinpoche will get started. We're on stanza 324 of the precious Garland, and yeah, we'll get started in just a moment with that. Let's start with the outer mandala offering in English and Tibetan. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Yedam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamni Ratayami. Jodan Zoriya Janama Janju Badu Dani Jasuri Nagi Chunye Jipezunam Jedrula Menje Zanye Jubayu Jodan Zoriya Janam La Janju Badu Dani Jasuri Nagi Chunye Jipezunam Jedrula Menje Zanye Jubayu Jodan Zodiya Yanam La Yanju Badu Happy Father's Day also. Ducheng Paba Ducheng. Semchen Tamche Pashepa. Yeah, Paba. Papa Ducheng. Father's Day.
What they are is that kind the Chenmo and the Lamrim Rabbis, Chebchung Lang, Ding Lang, Chebchimbi Lang, what the Latin Saji, what the is.
So today we are looking at Nagarjuna's precious Garland, and this text contains exactly very similar information to Lama Tsongkhapa's Lamrim, or the Lamrim, the teachings for beings of three capacities. So when we look at Lord Buddha's teachings, and we look at how we study them, we can divide the material into two categories: the pronouncements of Lord Buddha, the Kangjur, and the Tanjur, which are the authentic Indian commentaries that comment on the Buddha's spoken word. All of these texts are considered authoritative. So these texts are very difficult to put into order if one wants to figure out how to engage in practices. They're quite difficult and encoded, and are mixed with figurative teachings and then literal teachings. So there's a big need for interpretation, and there's also a need for almost an outline being put into an outline being made in order to know where to begin and what comes next and what happens after that, etc. So what Lord Atisha did, and Lord Atisha was an Indian master who came to Tibet at the request of a student to clarify some things in the Dharma. And Lord Atisha, Sri Dipamkara, came to Tibet and wrote what was called the Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. What that text did was summarize all of Lord Buddha's teachings and the authentic Indian commentaries, and showed how a practitioner could go from where he or she was at, whether they were at the very, very beginning or very close to enlightenment. And there would be guidelines to know where you were or weren't within it. The Lord Atisha took all of these teachings and put them into graduated stages of path. And they were for a practitioner to achieve enlightenment from no matter where he or she was standing at spiritually at the time. Whether beginner or at the 8th Bodhisattva ground, the Lamrim teachings were put in an order to verify where you've been and show you where you need to go. So Atisha put all of the teachings into three categories that are called the teachings for beings of three capacities. The teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity, medium capacity, and then the teachings for beings of great capacity. And these categories of teachings were for specific practitioners and their individual goals. So the Buddha said that some people would just like to look towards their next rebirth, their future lives, and not have lower realm rebirth again. There are teachings for those who wish to get rid of all of that, renounce cyclic existence altogether, but not quite become a Buddha, and just achieve liberation for themselves. And then there were teachings for beings who wanted to become a Buddha. So that's basically how they were put into, how the order that they were put in. So the teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity were for practitioners who wish to achieve rebirth in the higher realms of cyclic existence. So this practitioner, the Buddha said, engages in going for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, engages in ethical behavior that abandons the 10 non-virtuous activities, and then acknowledges downfalls, acknowledges negativities. And the Buddha stated by depending upon those practices, a person would be able to achieve higher realm rebirth, that this would cause higher realm rebirth. So this was the first category. And the Buddha said that if you wanted to practice the medium teachings, they would be dependent upon these practices as well. So this is the reason they're called shared in common with, because they're necessary as foundations for the next level, if you will, or the next category, if you will. So that practitioner would not be free from suffering altogether. He or she would just be free from the suffering of the lower realms. So there's a facsimile of renunciation. They renounce the lower realms of cyclic existence. So they have a desire to definitely emerge from the lower realms of cyclic existence. So a lot of people think, oh, small scope is really just small and easy practices. This is something where day and night you don't want to go in the lower realms, so you practice refuge, don't engage in the 10 non-virtuous activities, and acknowledge downfalls. So your desire to get out of the lower realms is a continuous thought. That's the kind of practitioner that is, when we say a small scope practitioner, that's a very highly realized being if they have realized the small scope. And the next category of teachings is for practitioners who wish to get rid of cyclic existence altogether, wish to not be a hell being, a hungry ghost being, or an animal being, wish to not be a human demigod or a god being. This practitioner finds out that the afflictive obstructions, which are caused by grasping at true establishment, are what bind him or her to any among those 6 types of realms of cyclic existence. So the Buddha said, if you want to emerge from those for yourself alone, not focusing on others, emerging for yourself alone, then practicing the 3 highest higher trainings would allow you to do that. The highest higher trainings in ethics, concentration, and wisdom would allow a practitioner to achieve nirvana, or an individual liberation, and get rid of what are called the afflictive obstructions that are caused by grasping at true establishment. But these teachings that are called teachings shared in common with beings of medium capacity don't remove what are called the obstructions to omniscience. Those are the imprints of the afflictions that are left over even after you get rid of the afflictive obstructions. And those imprints, although they don't cause samsara, they don't cause cyclic existence, they cause not being omniscient. They cause one to not be all-knowing. So those are forms of suffering for a practitioner who wants to really help everyone, because you need to be kind of all-knowing to be of use to everyone. So the practitioner that says, I want to become a Buddha because, yes, I need to emerge, but also everyone around me is suffering in the same way that I am, and even worse than I know at this time. So I would like to take on the task of freeing them all, which is called the extraordinary attitude, which is the 6th causal step for realizing bodhicitta, and the 7-point cause and effect practice for realizing bodhicitta passed down from Lord Atisha. And then that practitioner says, I can't do it. I can't free them all because I'm not omniscient. I must become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And the Buddha stated that if you get that mind, and it's a mind, it's not a thought or a wish or sometimes having it, it's a mind that's continuous, always want to become a Buddha for the sake of others, not have to suffer ever again. And then you couple that with the 6 perfections. The Buddha said that that would allow you to become what he had become, a fully realized Buddha that was omniscient, a Buddha that no longer has any obstructions to omniscience. So these are the categories of the teachings that Buddha taught. How to achieve the result of higher realm rebirth, how to achieve the result of an individual nirvana, and how to achieve the result of complete Buddhahood. So Lord Atisha put them into those categories, and then Lama Tsongkhapa and so many Kadampa masters commented on that as well. And then now we are here today because of all of that kindness, and we're studying the Precious Garland. And how does that relate? The Precious Garland contains exactly the same information, but if you know that Lamrim, you know where to put everything that you read in this text into context. you know where it goes on the path and how it relates to becoming a Buddha. So all of the same information is in here. It's just not packaged as nicely. So that's why it's a beautiful thing to have spent over 10 years studying Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. Because if everyone was paying attention, then this is a breeze to read. Maybe not the Madhyamaka stuff, I get that. But you know what's going on and where what goes. You do. You may not think you do, but you really do if you look at it closely. The first thing is, the first category is high status and certain goodness. That means rebirth in the higher realms of cyclic existence, abandoning the lower realms is high status, and definite goodness is ultimately Buddhahood, but it's also talking about liberation. So we know where high status fits, small scope. We know where certain goodness, definite goodness fits, medium and great scope. So this is the framework for the whole text. So now we are at 324 stanza. We did 323. And let's see what goes. Dalai. Okay.
What the Jibatama look Lodo Jibaji, the Jibatama Inan, then the way of Yunguris, Jimmy Lonsha teach it there. Jibatama, Jibatama in a Lonsha Chiburis, Sindel Lonsha Chibut, Jimmy Jiburis, Tanda Jibatana, Mauban, and Lonsha Chiburis. What does one do?
So on 323, it says, appoint masters who know good policy, who practice the doctrine, are civil, pure, harmonious, undaunted, of good lineage, of excellent ethics, and grateful. Appoint generals who are generous, without attachments, brave, kindly, who use the treasury properly, are steadfast, always conscientious, and practice the doctrine. As administrators, appoint elders of religious disposition, pure and able, who know what should be done and are skilled in the royal treatises. Understand good policy, are unbiased, and are kindly. Every month you should hear from them about all income and expenses, and having heard, you yourself should tell them all that should be done for the centers of the doctrine and so forth. If your realm exists for the doctrine and not for fame or desire, then it will be extremely fruitful. If not, its fruit will be misfortune. So here it's Nagarjuna. So this text was written to a king on how to run a kingdom as a Buddhist and how to be a Buddhist running a Buddhist kingdom. And it's advice on daily living, and it's given, this instruction is given by a lot of masters because it's very applicable to our everyday lives on how we can modify our behaviors in order to achieve results that are not only good for this life, but good for our future lives. Because this life's being controlled by our imprints and our karma, so we've already done the things that are controlling our experience right now. We can purify as much as we can so that we get rid of that kind of lack of independence in terms of non-religious karma that's arising and causing experiences that are not happy. But really, it's right now that have some kind of say in what goes on in our future. Because what is going on now is an experience that's been created, unless we're engaging in something seriously heavy in terms of the power of the basis. Most of our experiences are that we're having now are controlled by our previous karma. It might have been a million lifetimes ago that the participant in that action engaged in it. So it's important that we take this time right now to practice, in this minute right now to practice, because of impermanence. We don't know when we're going to die. The causes for death are many, and the causes of life are very few. We see that in the Lamrim when we study the human life of leisure and opportunity. The 8 leisures and the 10 opportunities are presented, and they aren't just presented as intellectual kind of exercises. They're exercises for our mind to understand that we need to practice right now, because this situation that we're in is only caused by our previous goodness. So when we're having Dharma practice and when we have good experiences, it's because previously we did something good. So if we like those good experiences, we need to engage in all good, because that's how we can be happy in the future. So Rinpoche said here, there's a lot of advice being given to be ethical and to appoint ministers who are ethical, and then to engage in generosity. Generosity is a reoccurring theme because it's the first of the 6 perfections. When we see the quote from the Buddha in Sutra, it says, Jimbi Longshu Tringi De. From generosity comes the enjoyments. So all of the nice things, a house and this nice yard, and drinks, and all of the things that we have, these wonderful things that we have, are from previous generosity that we engaged in. So it's not because we're being generous right now that we have these things. It's because previously, in previous lives or previous lives, we engaged in generosity. And then as a result, right now, we're enjoying the fruits of that generosity. But it doesn't have anything to do with really what we're doing at this moment. Our future will. And then it says from ethics, happiness. So the higher realms of and liberation and Buddhahood are caused by ethical behavior as the foundation. So it's important to know that all of our experiences are linked to certain actions. And here the king is being advised by Nagarjuna to only engage in actions that cause happiness in the future, and only appoint people who will engage in actions that will cause happiness in the future. And as a byproduct of that, you will have a harmonious kingdom, because everybody's motivation will be to work for the sake of others. It even says in here to make sure that you keep up the other religions' temples. Make sure that you appoint people to make them beautiful and take care of them, and take care of them in a very, very good way, and make sure that all the people are nice to everyone that comes there. So it's just advice in general that causes harmony, but it causes harmony for us in the future lives as well. So, Rinpoche, Chu Kaba Kasa.
What?
What's that? 6. The 4 looks like a 5. Numbers are so hard for me. You know what I mean? The 5 looks like a 4. All right, 4 or 5. All right, it's a little Westerners studying Tibetan joke, because it does. All right, 327. All right, I read one more.
What the Yimba Abbot in the Debbie Abu
Golong Yapo. Rebe.
The Jenju Termine
the Kedra Golmare, the Mu Gogomare, the Golong Yapo.
Me want Tata Jitena, me want Tata Jitena, Peche Pension, Tunju Bay, Seta Treji, Jessidan. 대신소스 다 자비 레가도 추동 좀 버고레스 어떤 손에서 쉐베 겐신 레상와 쉐베 겐신 레상와 제바 쉐바 딜레스 근데 제바 아버지 디발 레고레스
냠도 내가 주 초보 주기 초보 주초
야
오케이
나시 그봐 통조와 모두다도 최지소 그다 잡아 초디소 개들이 신앙 최지지 란주베 다도 제소 노안도스 다 초반에 제고가 있나 되는 어때 예지 공부레스 어떤 손에서 맞아 대바 쉐바이 르젠다는 타지랑 잡으치지 따바야 해지 변생 코나지스 잡으고 제는 예지 제고레서 맞아 대제 손실라 쳐봤더니 예지 다니 양바 저라니 다니 첨부 해지네 니지진네 진나 샹아신 샹아 냐중 전나 당원 전부가 저거는 말로 그래서
네 콘마 매 mambo cena 샤뽕아 디소
아제 저거 말로 굴러
less oh for the weaker prisoners I see 네네
니지진도 나자 나신 냐중 전나 당원 냐중 전 주디가 마당고是 하만나죠. 제리셔스. 어떤 사람이 그러려면 한번씩 오서다. 가야 말을 매번도 가야 말을 매번. 저한테 사마만 좀 오지. 최근 간라. 상세매 텔레도바 매번째 너무 많이 텔레네. 유미체바 디바수 유미체바 디바수 저는 제시 마다와
wow
제시 봐도 지켄다 크다 자다 동아다 해다 대비 도와제스
가르치네
저만 최대가 또 그걸로는 해제야 사가 제마다 어떤 제고
Rinpoche they ke chambudu garsine genye by genye domba logudu the songkhan dekan the gulung hold on
너무 많이 들려나
the ngama joka ngama
디바수
ngama the domba the domba the anjusunang the
저는 간라 당선에 달라 동바 메버체스 동바 메버체스 당선에 들는 동바 메버체스
genye domba chagadu
동바 많이 버체스
genye pai domba
이게 됐지
gangesine the inji ke genye the domba gare ale shanchu sembi domba chikshena yomari be
동바 메버체스 동바 메버체스
domba gare
동바 메버체스
sutar domba shansen domba gare
동바 체스 보마 동바 많이 버체스 동바 메버체스 동바 많이 버체스
domba gare Rinpoche
너무 많다. 너무 많이 버체스
Losala. You see how it says layperson in the English translation? Oh, I see. They've translated as like you lose your layperson vow. Right. It becomes not vow. So you're vowing to think of them to be free, so it becomes a non. You see what I'm trying to get at? So in the English it says, for each whom you do not think to free, you will lose the vow. Due to having lost the vow, faults will constantly be amassed. I'll read it again. For each whom, I'm sorry I'm putting you on the spot, but there's only two of us who could possibly work through this, and I want to understand this. Because if you lose a layperson vow, if you don't think of helping someone, I just need to understand what this means. For each one whom you do not think to free, you will lose the vow. Due to having lost the vow, faults will constantly be amassed. Dumba mayimba cha.
No, my is bon.
Dene the kon genye pai dumba yuna genye logudue. Yeah, it's saying your vow is, if you have a vow, it becomes not a vow. So vow in general. Dene gelong pai dumba yuna gelong pai dumba logudue. Becomes a non-vow. I don't know. We'll have to work through that another time, but it's interesting language. And I saw the Tibetan and I didn't see this layperson vow in here, so that's why I stopped him. We'll look at it later. This lesson. Okay, that's good. Every month, let me reread this because this is where Rinpoche started. I read too far. Every month you should hear from them about all the income and expenses, and having heard, you yourself should tell them all that should be done for the centers of doctrine and so forth. If your realm exists for the doctrine and not for fame or desire, then it will be extremely fruitful. If not, its fruit will be misfortune. So it's the motivation behind this is important. It needs to be of good motivation, of religious motivation. O Lord of humans, since in this world nowadays most are prone to wreak havoc on each other, listen to how your governance and your practice should be. Let there always be around you many persons old in experience of good lineage, knowing good policy, who shrink from ill deeds. In the Tibetan, it speaks of wise, ripayap, wisdom, being wise. Of good experience, maybe, that old in experience, wise. And it's referring, I asked Rinpoche, to Dharma friends. Make sure you're surrounded by those who are not irreligious, those who practice in accordance with virtue. And let there always be around you many persons old in experience of good lineage, knowing good policy, who shrink from ill deeds, are agreeable and know what should be done. Even those whom they have rightfully fined, bound, punished, and so forth, you should have, being moistened with compassion, should always be caring. O Lord, through your compassion, you should always generate just an attitude of altruism, even for all those embodied beings who have committed, I think this is about a bodhisattva vow. Even for, that's my interpretation, the translator's interpretation. O King, through your compassion, you should always generate just an attitude of altruism, even for all of those embodied beings who have committed awful ill deeds. Especially generate compassion for those whose ill deeds are horrible, the murderers. Those of fallen nature are receptacles of compassion from those whose nature is magnanimous. Free the weaker prisoners after a day or 5 days. Do not think the others are not to be freed under any conditions. For each whom, yes, so it's speaking of the prisoners being objects of the compassion, and for those of compassion whose nature is magnanimous. And so it says, for each one whom you do not think to free, you will lose the vow. It's got to be that intention. That anyway, due to the having lost the vow, faults will constantly be amassed. As long as prisoners are not freed, they should be made comfortable with barbers, baths, food, drink, medicine, and clothing. So I asked Rinpoche just a question, if someone had committed a murder, but they were weaker, but they were still prone to that, what would that be advice? But that's when you interpret it, and you say, you understand, you interpret it. Okay. Okay. Lesson. Then Khensur the drata, then Lekate, give them work. I see.
And the whole cool Kasukure. Samashia, the Water cool Donji, Maris. The Yimis Radan Samba, Jebime, Tato, Lebar, Shejene, Messi, Majeba,
there it is.
Jeba, Tatu, what the could that Maduja, then what the
Sajenda.
Say out of them, you must.
Less so. Okay.
Yeah.
Less so. Okay. So the answer to my questions in stanza 337. So I should have just read further. As long as prisoners are not freed, they should be made comfortable with barbers, baths, food, drink, medicine, and clothing. Then the Songkan Deken, the Drata Lekate Te. Okay, so here it's speaking of make them barber, have them do like work as barbers. So it's saying make them comfortable and make sure they have medicine and clothing. But Rinpoche said there's an aspect of giving them work as in here of some sort, giving them some sort of skill. So he's saying give them work as barbers and work as bath workers also. Just as deficient children are punished out of a wish to make them competent, so punishment should be carried out with compassion, not through hatred nor desire for wealth. Once you have analyzed and thoroughly recognized the angry murderers, have them banished without killing or tormenting them. So don't ever execute anyone. Just put them somewhere else that's not in the kingdom. So it's not saying in a jail either. It's just saying somewhere else. Because it doesn't say the angry prisoners, it says angry murderers. In order to make, I think that's where you are. 37, 38. Need something to draw down. Need something to turn the losar.
Chemis, Tama.
The losar.
Naman Badala, Noroma, Shandu Taru, Hiji in
Lasar.
Treji Shai. Danse, this danse, Shime, danse, you modest. Radan Samba, Jibime, Tato Leba, Shejene, Message Neba, Majiba, Vineteba. Kuma Duja Jingena, Kose, then Jima, Loman, Rotna, Tato Deus. Rama Yuba, Yukuya, Shata, Shamatai, Shenji, Tato Bayu, Jendemba, Chudan Tumbi, Jundu Cheese, Talical Chudan Tumbi, the Gajagures, and then Nella, Danije, Rajin Kute, Jeruta, Jashan Jesu, Tunjin, Hamanala, Cherries, what did each what the loss on?
Okay. Rinpoche said just to read the English, it's fine. In order to maintain control, oversee all the country through the eyes of agents, always conscientious and mindful, do what accords with the practices, continually honored in an exalted way those who are foundations of good qualities, with gifts, respect, and service, and likewise honor all the rest.
Rudi Chen, Rudi Chen, Kodimatu, Jejusis, Jabe Junshi, Shinjoyatan, Shig, Altar Soyatan, what the Legacy was that Kodimatu, Jejusis, Rajin Debo, Chidela, Mondal Shana, Temba, Lekaka Tembache Woods, Jabuton, Artisan, Jidan, Dena, Graduates. Tajibatan, Artisan, the Ziji the Demoguna, Jibatan, and Gabion Woods.
Bless you. Then Rinpoche, this Shati Garshin, the other guy. The Jopo, Jopi.
Jabu Judicita, Shinjoya, Rig, Ultra Zoya, or Lekayoro. Kudi, do Jeju Rajin Devo, Chedela, Monji Shana, Temajus, Monga Leha Tembi,
The Mon Shagar. The bird Yuribe.
this woman,
Bird Yoma.
Shawa, Leha,
Okay.
Shinzoya,
Okay.
Tata, Leha, Shawa.
Okay, so okay. Then
Chedela, Monji Shana, Temajus, Monga Leha Tembi,
Lesso. Jimbo.
Jabutoming or Tujan, Jetan, Dema Gajote, Suga, Hena, Shetu Be, Shega Ila, Shega Rai, Lajindo, Shega Lajindo, Tata JB, Jenana, Tata Rebe Jenana, Church Jesse, Roman Euros, Rebe Jebashin, Lekajiri, Nan Jabugi, Lekat Damium with S. Reba Mai, Reba,
Ale Ripa.
Reba Mai, Manjoshin, Shumi Mai, Shusunjuru, Shumaima, Chuzus, Jesse Jita, Paruna, Hant Shuna, Hant Majun, Hamanjuru, Chujinebi, Dantona, Shumi, Chuji, Jimesis, Shumi Chuji Jimesis, Shumaima, Sugar to Jajan wasn't the
What time is it?
9:51.
Thank you.
Chumaima tree in the Shiju Monas.
Lesso.
Tatan Yona, Mani Song, Jamebene, Dudeme, Nibademe, Niji Shir, Zojan Tanto, Tomato. Maja Sudan du Jetan, Tanjijan, Sudani, Jameshir, Tabi Tanto, Tomato, Tabi Tomato, Jetta Dungan, Shetuba, Tudula, Tanto Deva, Najeshi. The Jin Dendu Junala, Dungan Toma, Dungan Toyan, Najeshi. The Woni, Nimesher, Dead don't tell you, Sibadan, Dungan, tell you, Sibaron. Kisher, the Ton you choose. Tagan you somebody what the Bill Jibba in a call to the sitting there. Can't get on, Geshe now. So to what is enough. Tanya to the send you to get sent from this. Send you member, Salmon you. Selling you want the member, the same woman is. German Haji Manduto, German Haji Manduto, German Haji Manduto, the Tanaya, the Tayanda, Chijindo, what German Shenana, German by Majindo, German by Majindo, Nemen Leme, Yanganda. 당간 요거 상바당 돈이 좀 싫어도 줄지나 타바토거를 좀 된서 그래서 샤주 선배장 통은 샤주 내바토 샤주 선배장 어떻다 보통은 샤주 내바토거를 저는 해진 바지 기 샤주 봐도 시상주로 대신 시베 대전에 샤주 선바 또단 때나 살라 또도 뭐바나 라도 담베 뭐바시 요새 다 메시 봐 요새 쩐도 드셔 봐 요새 많이 벌어 요새 좀 드시네 야나 요새 동아이 제바칠라 다시 장 대신 앞 말이지 가던 거 전진 장 이제 너봐 쩐다네 이제 해봐 요새도 신은 티바 첨불라 요즘에 당선주 자가 돈을 대실 제도로지 가와야 가도 요즘에 대전대 달라 당와 신조로 대바전은 루네베 대바전 루네베 제주 당시 출발이 대바전야 시시나 당于시주 매주고 뒤미 돈은 사와샤 제가 현재 레시진 돈에 제는 마바 사와샤지 제신기 사와샤지 제신 취지전도 인도신 인도 셰타베 돈에 전
Get that far ahead.
돈에 제정 회제 해봐 쉐바 매배 해봐 쉐바 제 매배 해봐 쉐바가 매배도 간다스 팽글스 마도와이 시제 팽조와 샤나 다다 제달라 해도 다시 제면데 최근 나이 로이노 제대 대충原当于对加钱通就拿单位对吧用这了对中当完就是
That's cool.
yeah
Yeah. Sumja, Dunja, 75?
那就得了
Okay, 75. Did we skip any stanzas? Okay, yeah, because I was looking at the English. And okay, I don't think we did, because he was reading it slowly. Okay, all right. Let's see where way up. Okay. In order to maintain control, oversee all the country through the eyes of agents, always conscientious and mindful, do it accords with the practices, continually honor in an exalted way those who are foundations of good qualities with respect, gifts, respect, and service, and likewise honor all the rest. The birds of the populace will alight upon the royal tree, providing the shade of patience, flourishing flowers of respect, and large fruits of resplendent giving. We got to that. I think that maybe is when I lost track because I was trying to look something up. It talks about making a beautiful throne, Rinpoche said. So constructing some sort of beautiful throne with large fruits and flowers and so forth. Monarchs whose nature is generosity are liked if they are strong, like a sweet hardened out inside by cardamom and pepper. If you analyze with reason thus, your governance will not degenerate. It will not be without principle, nor become irreligious, but be religious. So your governance will not become, Rinpoche said, that which is not Dharma being said it's Dharma. So you will, so your governments will not be, basically be incorrect. So it won't become not Dharma. So this irreligious, the word religion can be also Dharma. It's the word chu. So if you have principles, you have a religious kingdom. It won't a Dharma kingdom. It won't be a non-Dharma kingdom. It won't be. It says if if it will not be without principle. If the principles are correct, then it means that the Dharma is correct. So it won't. What isn't Dharma won't be presented as Dharma, basically, or what isn't religion won't be presented as religion. You did not bring your dominion with you from your former life, nor will you take it to your next. Since it was gained through a religious practice, you would be wrong to act against the practices. O king, exert yourself to avert a sequence of miserable supplies for the realm through misuse of royal resources. O king, exert yourself to increase the succession of the dominion's resources through proper use of the royal resources. So Rinpoche said here, this is speaking of renunciation and doing everything from the foundation of a desire to definitely emerge. It says, you did not bring your dominion with you from your former life, nor will you take it to your next. So all of these things that you have, you won't be able to take with you. So if these were all gained from previous virtue, since it was gained through religious practice, so the good things that you have were gained from the Dharma, from Dharma practice. It would be wrong to act against the Dharma if the good things that you have are from the Dharma and you like the good things that you have, and that's what causes the good things that you have. It would not make sense to not practice the Dharma. So then you generate this desire to definitely emerge and knowing that you wish to be free. So Rinpoche said this section gets into renunciation because then it will then talk about compassion. Although I see what, okay, it's okay. Although universal monarchs rule over the four continents, their pleasures are regarded only as two, the physical and mental. Physical feelings of pleasure are only lessened of pain. Mental pleasures are made of thought, created only by conceptuality. All the wealth of worldly pleasures are just a lessening of suffering, are only creations of thought. Hence, they are in fact not meaningful. Just one by one, there is enjoyment of continents, countries, houses, homes, conveyances, seats, clothing, beds, food, drink, elephants, horses, and women. When the mind has any of these as its object, due to it, there is said to be pleasure. But since at that time no attention is paid to others, the others are not then in fact meaningful causes of pleasure. When all five senses, eye and so forth, apprehended, I want to go back to this. I'm going to read this and then we're going to go back to this next time because I think a page, when the mind has only one of these as its object, due to it, there is said to be pleasure, but since at that time no attention is paid to others, the others are not then in fact meaningful causes of pleasure. When all five senses, eye and so forth, apprehend their objects, a thought of pleasure does not refer to all of them. Therefore, at the time, they do not give pleasure. Whenever any of the five objects is known as pleasurable by one of the five senses, then the remaining objects are not so known by the remaining senses, since they then are not meaningful causes of pleasure. The mind apprehends an object of past object which has been apprehended by the senses and imagines and fancies it to be pleasurable. Also, the one sense which is here in the world is said, no one object is meaningless without an object, and the object also is meaningless without it. Just as a child is said to be born in dependence on a father and mother, so a visual consciousness is said to arise in dependence on an eye sense and a form. Past and future objects and the senses are meaningless. So too are present objects, since they are not distinct from the two. So it's saying that the mind, here it's speaking of the mind creating its experience in a way. So it's saying there are external objects and so forth that exist, and the mind's experience of them is created by the karma and the imprints that are previously implanted within the mind. So the object of observation of that mind is merely an object that then has details and qualities that are designated upon it. So it's saying that it's just as a child, just as due to the error, the eye perceives a whirling firebrand as a wheel, so the senses apprehend present objects as if real. The senses and their objects is regarded as being composed of the elements. Since the elements are meaningless individually, they are also meaningless in fact. If the elements are each different, it follows that there could be fire without fuel. If mixed, they would be characterless, such as also to be ascertained about the other elements. Because the elements are thus meaningless in both those ways, so too is a composite. Because a composite is meaningless, so too are forms meaningless in fact. So it's talking about the elements are empty. Earth, water, wind, fire, space is empty. They all dependently originate. They appear to be a substantially existent, inherently existent object from their side, but they are merely a collection of parts which are designated as earth, water, wind, fire, space. So it's saying that we are misapprehending. The conventional truth is called also concealer truth because it conceals the true identity of the object, and that is emptiness. It's true lack of true establishment. So when the I consciousness apprehends something, it's not apprehending, it's not putting qualities to the object. Those qualities are being forced from the mental consciousness to decipher what the I consciousness has picked up. So that's all occurring through karma and through either correct understanding or incorrect understanding. And the incorrect understanding, the grasping at things as being truly established, as not being concealed, as having true identity, is what makes us react in negative ways, because we then think that we ourselves are truly established and our suffering is truly established, and that our hurt and all of our anger, all of these things that happen are truly established, and we identify them as who we are and as real and incontrovertible when they are merely designated by us based on our previous karma and experiences and ignorance. So this, I know what happened. This went like this, somehow in the Tibetan and the English. So that, because I remember right here, picking back up. Also, because consciousness, feelings, discriminations, and compositional factors altogether and individually are without essential factuality, pleasures are not ultimately meaningful. Just as lessening of pain is fancied to be pleasure. So if you're in pain and you have a little less pain, that's considered pleasurable. So destruction of pleasure is also fancied to pain. It says, just as lessening of pain is fancied to be pleasure in fact, so destruction of pleasure is also fancied to be pain. Thus, attachment to meeting with pleasure and attachment to separating from pain are to be abandoned because they do not inherently exist. Thereby, those who see this are liberated. What sees reality? Conventionally, it is said to be the mind. Without mental factors, there is no mind, and hence mind and mental factors are meaningless, due to which is not asserted that they are simultaneously. Knowing thus correctly, hold on one second. Okay. Thus, attachment to meeting with pleasure and attachment to separating from pain are to be abandoned because they do not inherently exist. Thereby, those who see thus are liberated. What sees reality? Conventionally, it is said to be the mind. For without mental factors, there is no mind, and hence minds and mental factors are meaningless, due to which is not asserted that they are simultaneous. Knowing thus correctly, just as it is, the transmigrating beings do not exist in fact. One passes from suffering not to, without appropriating, like a fire without its cause. Bodhisattvas also, who have seen it thus, seek perfect enlightenment with certainty. They make the connection between lives until enlightenment only through their compassion. Since the collections of merit and wisdom of the Bodhisattvas were taught by the one thus gone in the great vehicle, those who are bewildered about the full extent of the paths and fruits of the great vehicle deride them out of antagonism, either through not knowing the good qualities and the defects of self-concern, or identifying good qualities as defects, or through despising good qualities, they deride the great vehicle. Those who deride the great vehicle, knowing that to harm others is defective, and that to help others is a good quality, are said to despise good qualities. Those who deride the great vehicle despise good qualities. Those who despise the great vehicle, source of all good qualities, in that it teaches taking delight solely in the aims of others, due to not looking to one's own, consequently burning themselves in bad transmigrations. One type with faith and emptiness forsakes it through misconception of its denying cause and effect. Others who are angry forsake emptiness through despising it, even if the faithful type is said in sutra to be burned, what can be said to those who turn their backs on it through despising it? So we'll end there. Question and answers. Coleman. And also I'll look at this in a moment.
So I had a dream, and in my dream, I had like a vessel of butter tea.
Okay.
I drank it. I was wondering if that was qualified as a purification.
Okay. So the participant asked, he said he had a dream that he drank butter tea and wants to know if it's a sign of purification. Rinpoche, kon triwa, kon nilam danson, then nilam, butter tea, you said? Kon buja tongson, then deepa dason.
Yeah,
Yes, so that's good, he said. It could be, yes, a sign of a sign of purification. So there are three parts of your night's sleep that are said to analyze, and you don't analyze any of it if you are ill. So if you have any kind of sickness or a fever or whatever we would think of as ill, physically or mentally, we don't analyze it. But if we are physically and mentally healthy, we can analyze the last part of our dream state. The Tibetans or the doctrine divides our dream state into three categories: the first, the second, and the third. The first category, the Nilandan Sun, Tambo, the Le Nipa Ha Sumba Dakiche, Rebe. The Molandan, the Tambo, the Tambo, the Natsu Le, the Leka, the Natsu Samama, then Nipa Hla, then Sumba Data, then Nama Chiran Tem Mambo Sumpre, then Nilan Dak Dang, Molandan.
Malan Garis and Malan. Malan shows a low enough. I should not do a shabby. Chenrezig says no to what the Malan Chinese. You can the mean to my
Lesser.
I should not do a shabby. Chenrezig says no shabby. Milan's the words.
Vene, the Milan Tem Sum, Tambo Nipa Sumba, the Tama, the Natsu Lang, Nama, the Des Natsu Lana, Vida, the Natsu, the Deepa Dapida, the Jutsu K Chempo.
Nilan treasure or the Nilan on the Devat.
So there's three periods of sleep. The first is, and the second are, I don't remember which one. One is manipulated by the work and actions that you've done throughout your day. So that kind of goes into your dream. The second part of your dream state as you go in is manipulated by gods and deities and so forth, spirits that are in the room. It's one or the other. One's first and one's second. Those aren't the periods that you analyze. It's the last period right before you wake up. It's that you analyze. If you're well, you're healthy, you're not mentally or physically sick, you analyze that. And Rinpoche said there's various signs that can occur, and drinking something wonderful is one of them. Drinking milk, sitting on an elephant, washing yourself, seeing monks and nuns, practicing the Dharma, any kind of religious activities. These are all signs of purification. It's the time period right before you wake up. The late morning, 3, 4, 5 o'clock, not right when you go to sleep. So if right before you wake up, you had this dream, or Rinpoche has said that if you wake up with a generally good feelings, just a good feeling when you wake up, it's a sign of purification. So the butter tea, Rinpoche said, is a sign of purification. He just said it straight out. But if you are analyzing dreams, it's not just, it usually is specific periods in the dream that they analyze in the Tibetan tradition. But Rinpoche said the definition, I'm going to need my Hopkins textbook, but there's a definition of a dream is when it's a mental factor that doesn't have the other operating eye consciousness or it's a mental factor that doesn't have any of the other consciousnesses interacting. I'll get you the exact definition. I don't want to just wing it. It's right in there. But the Nilong, the Semjong. So it's a mental factor. And right when the video goes on, I can look up all the mental factors and their definitions are in the text I have. The Nilong Dang, the Miki number Sheba Yomar, not number Sheba Wangshe Yomar. Okay, so there are no sense powers. It's merely a sense factor that it creates the experience. So it's not created in dependence upon the sense powers. It's created upon a mental factor. There's probably a few words missing. Yes.
There's some equation that's there that says kind of generosity equals enjoyment. So there's some like in essence like
concordance.
Equation kind of like behind all of that. There's a way that but isn't it kind of what we're scripture today kind of a combination of all of that karma, including up to what we had to see in a second, and that what we're realizing at this moment is all of those things that have all the dependent individual moments up to the moment we're experiencing now. Because you also talk about like Rapa having achieving Buddhahood in one lifetime. But really, isn't it all of his experiences up to that moment?
Yeah, it's not one lifetime. That's the biggest misleading. That's a misleader.
Everything
yeah.
That moment. If I achieve enlightenment this afternoon, it's everything that I've done up to that moment, including the moment that I achieved enlightenment, which was the previous moment. So it's not that what I'm explaining today is a million lifetimes ago. It's everything leading up to the moment.
No, because you could be an ant. You could have right now. You have loaded in you, like I don't need a number we can't come up with of lifetimes potential as ants, as gods, as demigods, as hell beings. You have that loaded in you right now. You're only experiencing the karma that makes you, Scott, the human being, with enjoyments that Scott has. There's specific karmas that have created that. That could have been created in a week. Scott's whole life may have been created because karma grows. It's concordant, so the results are concordant. So all the bad things that happen are concordant with something bad, and all the good things that happen are concordant with something good. And that good or bad thing grows. So I'm not saying there's an equation that says it's a week for a life. I'm not saying that. But the perspective is that every action that we're creating that's virtuous or non-virtuous is going to create an experience in the future. And that experience grows like the seed of a walnut tree, they say. So if we engage in a large amount of generosity, it may make all our enjoyments for a lifetime. So it's really specific acts that are concordant with the experiences that we're having that create it. And they are specific acts. They're not cumulative acts. Those specific acts we did, though, were created by some other specific act that was concordant with it. So yes, we couldn't be here if it wasn't for all of the things that came up to it. But us being here isn't accumulation. It's some specific things in that accumulation. So it's like you've got this mass. I'm sounding like a storehouse consciousness guy right now, mind only school, but it's the best I can do for you. You got this mass of potential. Now we're sounding Madhyamika again, potential within your continuum that doesn't truly exist. And that mass is firing off experiences that are concordant with what's in that bucket, if it makes sense. And certain conditions arise for certain things to fire off from that bucket. And that bucket's full of non-virtue and virtue. And that's why we suffer and are happy. The Buddha has taken everything out of there that's non-virtuous by learning that grasping a true establishment and cherishing self is what makes you not a Buddha. So Buddha started working on getting rid of all of those things that weren't, you know, those virtuous things, you know, knowing reality and cherishing others. So Buddha removed all those things that weren't those things, that weren't virtue, that weren't compassion, love, etc., wisdom. And that's all that's left. So the Buddha's experience is just as forced by karma on him or her as ours is. But the Buddha's only got a bucket of good stuff, if you will. Rinpoche, konnichiwa de. Tanda, ngatsu de degudu, ngatsu mei luden yure. Then ngatsu mota yure, kamba yure. Then ngatsu de jimbi lonshu chingi de. Then ngatsu de lonshu mambo yuna de jimbi depu. Then ngatsu tsuchen, ngatsu meiyin, then tsuchen depo meiyin. The dewa, the dewa yakshu sanje, yine dewa sansan, the mei luden. Then ngatsu mei luden tsuchen den, the la dene. Gangisene the tsuchen dan, the shinju, the mambogu, the mei luden. Then kongi chiwa de. Ngatsu tse jewa ngama kanga nyamdu tanda the ngatsu the kanga the longshu dan kamba dan toa kangazu le kashe the tandazu garre ngatsu le kanga tandazu le kashezu gangisene ngatsu the nichi number sheba le mambo yuret jewa toma mepa lezu so then tanda the ngatsu toa dan the sa toa then ngatsu the miki toa dan ngatsu kamba the longshu the kanga ngatsu le kanga zugudu le chi ni sung zugudu. So there are various karmas, many various karmas that are creating this experience. So each of our almost moments of experience could be created by different karmas. So there's many karmas that are creating this experience now. Yine ngatsu tanda le kanga yomare. Gangisene de ngatsu le kanga de jena ngatsu de nyawa de dang yida de dang dendru de. Gangisene ngatsu yida le yu, dendru le yu, me le yu, nyawa le yu tanda. Dene de le tanda de jemason rebe. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so only some of those have some of the kashe depo. So a few of them of this bunch that we're talking about have resulted in the experience you're having now. I said the things we're eating, the things we're drinking, the things that we see, the house that we stay at, the car that we have, all of these things are from a few karmas, Rinpoche is saying, are results of a few karmas that are concordant with them. But not not all karmas experiencing it at once. And I said to him, if that was the case, we have hell karma right now, but we're not in hell. We have hungry ghost karma right now, but we're not a hungry ghost. We have animal karma, but we're not an animal. We're a human, and humans' karma is dependent upon ethics, because it says chingite, from ethics comes happiness, and the human basis is considered in a category of that happiness that Buddha spoke of. So various karmas are creating the experience, but not all karmas, because we aren't in hell. We have hell karma. You know what I mean? So if you died right now, it's possible, not probable, because you're an excellent being, but it's possible that in 15 minutes you could be in hell right now. And it wouldn't have anything to do with the goodness that got you here. You know what I mean? It would be something further back. And that's why it's so awful. Because we're sitting here like puppets, but we aren't. We really have a modicum of control and responsibility. But yeah. So that's the answer. Does that help? Doesn't help. Yeah, I mean, that's why they debate. He was saying the other day, I was trying to figure something out, and he just finally was like, debate 25, 30 years for 6.5 days. He said 3 times a day, every day for like 20 or 30 years, these topics. and then you'll know a little. Yes.
I have a science question. So on the topic of like quantum field theory and then theory of relativity. So I understand we understand a little bit about that. We have some theories, but we also know that like with quantum field theory, there are subatomic particles that are doing things that they don't really fit in with that theory. Same with theory of relativity. Some things happen that don't really fit in that theory of relativity. I know the Dalai Lama and other Buddhist scholars are working with our greatest, cosmic scientists, the quantum field theory scientists, the consciousness scientists, to try to
Catch them up.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, that's the reality.
There's a lot everybody.
I don't agree with that. As a Buddhist, I feel that Prasangika school, if anyone can negate that, I will study that and I will not be a Buddhist any longer.
Sorry. Well,
I'm just saying, no, as Buddhists, that's what we believe. The final view is the Prasangika view, and we've never seen that view negated.
Okay, that's not my question.
Yeah, no, I know.
So my question is about the 5 elements.
Yes.
The continuity of our arising phenomena.
Yes.
Our reality. Does Rinpoche, I'm wondering what he thinks about, are the 5 elements continuous in our arising reality, or is there any space where those 5 elements do not exist and never follow?
Ngatsu sa chu me long the jewa kanga kegudu. Ngatsu sheba yure. Ngatsu sa chu me long jewa ngama sa chu me long tanda sa chu me long gi ju. Bardo sa chu me long yure.
Zome leveji maro. Adu leveji. Zome leveji maro.
Then the zume jena. Then jewa shema. The mi luden yuna. Sa chu me long kaba ne.
Say the lay waters.
Ale, okay.
Lay
There's always an answer, unfortunately. So then ngatsu sachu me lung jewangama. Then the jewangama then the sachu me zume kamayimba jewangama sachu me lung bardu dro then a jewa shima dro juje. So the lineage of the elements continues from lifetime to lifetime. But Rinpoche said that the reason we say the lineage carries from lifetime to lifetime is because formless realm beings don't have the elements, but they have still the karma to create the elements within their continuum. So when someone is that is present, and Rinpoche said in the intermediate state there is earth, water, wind, fire, and space. So you have the elements in the bardo, but there are beings without the elements present because they're formless beings. It is an ultimate reality. The formless realm is just a mind realm. There's no form. But the being is abiding in shamatha, is abiding in some sort of consciousness that I don't understand. But there's some sort of abiding that is a being, though. It's an actual being that doesn't have form. But that is in samsara still. A formless realm being is in samsara, isn't enlightened, and is still subject to a rebirth in the hell realm. So. Yes.
On those elements somehow, somewhere located in those elements, is bodhicitta carried.
The sachu me lung, the kanga zuyin. So consciousness and form are mutually exclusive, and the elements are form. the elements are form. So the elements and the consciousness are separate. The elements can be contained within it, but they aren't it. They're separate. Because consciousness and form are mutually exclusive. So consciousness is consciousness, and consciousness causes consciousness, and form causes form, and the two don't intermingle, but they do abide with one another, with one another. But they, yeah, abiding is a good word actually. They abide, but they aren't it. So you would say that consciousness is necessarily not form. Co-located. No, I wouldn't say that consciousness has a necessary co-location with form, because then you have formless realm beings who. Rinpoche, yeah. The sachu me long dang atsu sheba sacha chipa.
사주 말로 sheba 사주 말로 된 되죠.
So the earth, water, wind, fire, and space rely on the consciousness. Den, la dene or den, live there or abide or rely on. The sachu me long, the sheba la dene, sheba den.
sheba 정원.
So they arise from consciousness. And I didn't mean to sound defensive. I just, when we're looking at all of these theories in science, this has been like a good 25 years I've been hearing about the Harvard lectures, and science keeps changing, and what they're asserting keeps changing, and none of the scientists negate the Prasangika view. It's a view of just really it doesn't have anything to do with going for refuge or any of that stuff. It's just how Buddha says an object comes about. And it's just not been negated from any system. And the only reason that I study this is because of that. Because I would only want to study what's correct. So I only feel passionate about that because of the investigation and the ever-changing idea and the contradictory points in even the quantum physics, where there's stuff they can't, these particles they can't quite figure out, and we would just say, yeah, they're empty. They lack true establishment because they have a north, south, east, and west, and an up and down, and a northeast, southeast, and a southwest, and a northwest. We can always subdivide things even smaller, and then we're naming them as something. So I Rinpoche, the Chenrezig, the ten Jordan Drapodu, the quantum physics, the theory of relativity, then Salo Kele Mambodu, Yene the Den Mindu, Gangisene Kashe the Samod, Kashe Samodu. That's Chamudu, the Kashe, the Shinto Korlo, Kujor, Shinta Kujor Tikshena. And then see Chenrezig, the Kanga Kelen Tugumari, then Ye Kelen this one. Chenrezig, Umi Tanjor Dawa Lemason. Umi Tanjor Dawa Katugumari. Chenrezig Katugumari, Shilupi Chu Katugumari, Hindu Katugumari, Yishu Katugumari. Umi Tanjor Dawa Katuna, the name Ye Jausudrogore. The Chiran, the Umi Tanjor Dawa, the Katuna, Chiran, the Dawa Jenda Jausudrogore. I said, I'm going to go for refuge to a different system if they can get rid of the Prasangika view, if they can negate it. And I asked him if he would too. The Umi Tanjor, the Mele, Umi Tanjor Dawa, the Data Kana, the Chiran Dawa, the Jigurbe. He said, you can't. So they've tried for a lot of years, a lot of this. They've done a lot of that and tried. You know, and I really respect the work that the Western field does, but I see the amount of just raw analysis going into a subject that's like this big. We say, oh, things are not truly established because they dependently originate, and we're comfortable with leaving with that. But then, for 20 years, these monsters of holiness just tear that idea apart and see if it's true or not. That's not truly established because it dependently originates. oh, and dependent origination is the king of reasons. Like that, and it makes sense to me, like just getting that far with it. But that it didn't make enough sense to these Geshes and to Ling Rinpoche and to Trijung Rinpoche and Panchen Sonandrapa and Jelsabje, Kirtapje, Nagarjuna and Aryadeva and Chandrakirti and Shantideva. And then even the subtleties that they negated within the autonomy school of Prasangika and the Yogacara school and the middle way, that's Sautrantika school. There's just so many things that were torn apart in the most subtlest ways that I just have so much respect for it. And we've had a lot of scientists, and we have a black hole physicist that's Rinpoche's student. Hey, Chris, right there. And she studies Madhyamika Prasangika. She's probably going to fire up my phone soon. Maybe not. Okay, yeah, I don't know how to do that, but we can try that. We can do that. I'm coming to the computer. I can't see it. That's helpful. Okay, hold on. Come back. Oh, we have a couple. It seems that there are specific things we can share and things we cannot share of our mind. We can share our love, but we cannot share our consciousness. We can share our knowledge, but we cannot share our karma. Why can we share some aspects of our mind, but not others? How do you say share? Right. Dacho Tepa. You hear him? He wasn't able to hear. Yeah.
Would need to actually, that's like the verse where it says that, you can't transfer your realization to others. There's pulling gears, right? So you can't.
Oh, pull, right.
But in general, when we talk about just giving someone an understanding of what's on your mind, you say, that's it.
The ngatsu the sen the dachu trupa ngatsu sen the nangla the ripa yure share up yure the ngatsu becha chi tugdu the ngatsu the ripa dang share up konso te tugdu dang drapodu yene ngatsu le te tugumare then garishene the ngatsu the sem nangla the kashe te tugdu yene kashe te the tugumare. If you want to come up closer too, we'll see where we get with that. The ngatsu sem, the nangla, the shera, dang ninji, dang shamba yure. Then ngatsu, the shamba yuna, then the me ropa che tu. Then konsu shamba datu. Then yene, ngatsu le, susu le, rangi le, konsu le kakare. Then garshene, ngatsu the kashe, the share. I still don't have it. I'm missing that part. The po.
You can just tell them that you're saying
Po the poa. My minjur.
Cool.
What is it? What's the quote? Ni dopa. There. He just said it. He just quoted it. Less so. Yine ngatsu the share up te tudu. Okay. So the answer to it. Thank you so much. Because that quote is what made it all work. So I appreciate you. I'm always open to any help as long as it's not for the point of showing. I always want help. I want more knowledge, and I want this to be as correct as possible. So yeah, I appreciate that. So it's stated that we can't give someone our excellent qualities. And I said, well, but we can teach them. So we're actually can give them wisdom. He said, like a facsimile of our wisdom. It's similar to it, but we're actually not giving them our wisdom. Our wisdom is our wisdom, and then what we share with them then becomes their wisdom. But that word share just got used. What we teach to them is similar to giving them our excellent qualities, but we're not actually giving them our excellent qualities, because the person has to understand it also. So there has to be the understanding of those words. You could talk to a squirrel and say those words, and it wouldn't have the same effect of being able to share your wisdom as it would to talking with someone who has a vessel, suitable vessel for that wisdom to be understood. So it seems like that's what's happening. It's similar to it, but you're not actually giving your quality, your excellent quality. So, and Rinpoche said that we can then, in terms of love, we can show love to others that will then make them maybe, because of seeing us as a role model, be more loving. So we can share our love in that way, but it really depends on the recipient and their karma and their previous wisdom that somehow links. Buddha said karma is more difficult than emptiness. So imagine that. What is the definition of all knowing or omniscience? Is it to know all things in the infinite universe? Yes, it's to know everything there is to know, conventional and ultimate truth simultaneously. Is it to know all things within a certain radius? No, there's no radius. That's what the all-knowing part is. Is it to know all things when you put your awareness to them or acquire about them? No, it means to know them all at all times. Are the gradual levels of omniscience? No, omniscience means the obstructions to omniscience have been removed. The Mahayana path of no more learning is achieved. Is omniscience and psychic awareness the same? No. There are many people who have psychic awareness that aren't necessarily Buddhist and non-Buddhist traditions. So psychic awareness is not the same as omniscience. And that Rinpoche, the Mushe, dan tamche chempa chipa. So no, omniscience and clairvoyance are psychic. I've used clairvoyance, but psychic awareness is not the same. Nagarjuna chipa yomari. So there are 5 different types of clairvoyances that can be found. Clairvoyance of knowing past lives and so forth. So there are 5 different types of clairvoyances that are things that can be known, but omniscience refers to knowing everything. So knowing all things, both conventional and ultimate. If you give me one moment, I can get you the Namchang Giseni got it. Oh, it's a wisdom that realizes all phenomena. So when we look at what the definition of omniscience is it's a exalted wisdom that realizes all phenomena. Okay, and then the clairvoyance, 5 clairvoyance. Just want to look up one thing. Oh, we'll look those up for later. So yeah, it's a exalted wisdom that realizes all phenomena, omniscience, all knowing. All right, is there anything else? I think that's it. Then the Namchen chu tamche shingu. Gunzu demba dan demba. Jutsu chi. Okay, so the Buddha can understand in one moment all phenomena, conventional and ultimate reality. So thank you very much. We'll do the concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, good. Yes. 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 I remember that. Yes.
Because what it was saying is if you have a mindset where you don't wish to free the prisoners.
Yes.
If you have this commitment, I'm not going to free the prisoners.
Yes.
You don't have the mind to free them, then it's like you're always accumulating this non-virtue of, I guess, keeping them, harming them by keeping them in prison.
I remember this. Yeah.
Like you have this non-vow, they call it sort of an opposite vow.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, he was saying he was not, Rinpoche was not holding it to anything. He was calling it that category. And I remember that. Yeah, I remember that. When if you're a butcher, you're always accumulating that killing karma. Yeah. Okay. All right, let's go to the, thank you very much, Losama. Let's go to the concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. Con ripa shera yabudu, the shiloka, the dumba mayimba, the yabudu, the gangisina, the shas, the sompa, sonken, the sha, the consena, the dakpar, suchupile, the saladu, the leka yuna, the rida se, leka chena, and dakpar, the suchupile saladu, and con de la son dumba mayimba cha. The ribe. Yeah, so he's thank you so much. I just explained in my choppy way. Yeah, all right, let's do this. Concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure land. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all-powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso. May you stay until samsara's end. I pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Rinpoche, upholder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, the spiritual friend who trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts with exceptional wisdom and perseverance. Suji Rinpoche Gunti Shepi Denam. Yeah, where's the dog?
Underneath the table over there.
So is it like the anti-bodhisattva? Like, how a bodhisattva, no matter what they do, they're always accumulating virtue. Like because the butcher has the mind of murder, is that it? Right? In a way? Like a temporary state of mind of murder always? Like Chupachita?
Maybe it's like a vow. I mean, maybe it's 45 vows, but is it the
Yeah. The individual liberation. And its form. Yeah, that makes sense. Rinpoche, the Dumba Mayimbi Dumba is Zuyin? It's Zuyin. No, Yomaribe. Non-associated, compositional factor. Anyway. Thank you so much, everyone.